Welcome to Reimagining American Dream, podcast number 5. Our topic today is We the People. Is America a melting pot or mosaic? And what's the impact for the future? Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Bernie Mullin, otherwise known as Dr. B. We're coming to you from my home in Denver, Colorado, and this is the 5th in a series of 12 podcasts which focus on providing solutions to the top 10 social issues that Americans are facing today. In that order, and those 10 issues are according to Pew Research with post-voting polls that outline the concerns and the beliefs on those issues that most influence the people's habits and opinions. Today's podcast is absolutely how do we make this dream available for everybody, and what does that mean in the complex changing face of America? It's very significant for America that we've chosen the name of the book, Reimagining America's Dream, RAD, R-A-D. Subliminally, the R stands for Republicans. The A in the middle stands for the Americans who are moderates, independents, centrists, that according to Pew may really approach as high as 60% of the popular vote this year, particularly as, no offense, Senator, but it doesn't seem like the majority of Americans like either of the two candidates that the parties are going to put up there.
Sure.
This book is not about advocating for a third party. It's not about advocating for one politician over another. It is about advocating for Americans to come together and stop the nastiness. You know, when I moved here 50 years ago from England, people loved each other. There were political differences, but the top Democrat and the top Republican would go out to dinner, drink far too much wine, and they would agree on a compromise. Seems to me anyway, okay, without oversimplifying politics. But today, you know, they're calling each other the devil or deplorables, and it doesn't seem to make any sense to me. This book is being published by the Aspire Difference Foundation, which I formed last year to support single parents, first with their mental health, and then the educational development of their preschool children second. TADF, the Aspire Difference Foundation, provides financial and other support primarily designed to ensure a stable household and then help the children's education. While most of our supported families have children growing up in income-deprived homes, we want to help the children to be able to go to kindergarten, possessing the necessary skills of English, reading, writing, math, and the social skills to be successful. And we believe we can, and that's what we're doing. To that end, all the proceeds from the book and all my business consulting income, net of direct expenses, go to TADF to support this work. Our preliminary goal is to support 50 families in Colorado alone. We're at about 11 right now, and to support 50 families in Atlanta, and we're just starting with 2 or 3 right now. So let us talk today about today's podcast topic, which really is about the changing complexion of America. Statistics tell us that the majority of United States population by 2050 will be minority. I see that as an amazing, wonderful thing. But for some, it isn't. And sadly, we want to talk about how do we get to the point where more and more people appreciate those differences and understand the value and the brilliance of what that brings to our culture. The panel today leads with Senator James Coleman, President Pro Tem of the Colorado Senate. You'll be hearing from him in a second. A rising star in the Democratic Party, he represents District 33. He's also a preacher and executive director with Faith Bridge. Gotta put that in.
That's right.
That's the fundamental values. Our other panelist is Professor Diana Bien-Aime, who is a member of the TADF board, very active in supporting the work we're doing. She is a Dr. Bien-Aime and professor of communication at Georgia State University. She's a great teacher, great mentor. As when you go online, you see all of the wonderful citations from the students, and she's in the process of finalizing her own book. So that's our panel today. I'm going to start with you, Senator Coleman. and we'll quickly dispense with the formalities, and I'll call him James.
There we go.
So, James, there are books about making the American dream aspirational for all Americans again. It's about making that dream available for all. Can you speak about your personal experience with the American dream? You know, you're an American born here, so maybe it wasn't on the forefront of the consciousness. At what point in time did it become on your consciousness?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Mullin, for having me today. This is an awesome opportunity to talk about your experience and all of our collective experiences and what the American dream looks like. And also to Dr. B, it's a privilege to serve on the panel with you as well. So my version of the American dream is rooted in education, but also career readiness. And I think it's amazing that you talk about this in your book, because when I finally landed back here in Denver, and what I mean, I was born here, moved to Nevada with my mother. My family came to Colorado in the 60s through the Air Force. And so my mother graduated from a local public high school, East High School. My brothers and uncle graduated from George Washington. My brother graduated the same year as Chauncey Billups.
Yeah.
And so I was
supposed to state basketball championship.
They won a state basketball championship, and he would go on to be an NBA champion. I was supposed to go to George Washington High School. What happened was I got kicked out of every public school that I went to until 6th grade. And the reason why was because I don't like bullies. If I saw you in school getting picked on, or Dr. B getting picked on, I would go to the bully and say, hey, you can pick on them, pick on me too. I didn't know how to use my words. I knew how to use my hands. And as an adult, I found myself in a position to use my words to advocate for folks. But that was something that was learned because I had an option to either go to a juvenile program or go to a private school when I was in 7th grade. And I was blessed to get a scholarship. I ended up in a private school that taught about Black history. Graduated from high school, went to college, came home, shifting into career readiness. I was blessed to be a part of an internship program that placed young college students, minority community, into Fortune 500 companies. I learned some skills there. I learned a lot about professionalism there. And these are things that I took that once I graduated from college, mixed with career readiness, it helped me be who I am today. I was blessed to run for office and run for re-election in the House in 2016 and 2018. Then 2020, I ran for the state Senate. And then I'm also blessed to lead and have founded multiple organizations. The American dream for me is being able to pay it forward and pay it back through education that I received, and also helping more people get opportunities to career readiness. That's my family's story and how we got here today.
Fantastic story. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. I like to call Professor Dr. Diana Balnami Lady Di. She is on our board and an amazing professional. And so, Lady Di, your same story, please.
Well, Bernie, first, I just want to echo the sentiments of just you being amazing, and the work that you're doing with the board and with the book is truly, to me, dynamic. It's an approach that I think I have studied for many years, experienced personally, and to just have you committed to making a dream a reality, I'm really, truly thankful to serve with you. And to Senator Coleman, an honor to be with you today, to have this conversation and this dialogue. And you utilized the word blessed quite a few times, and I would have to relate and identify with that. I am a child of immigrants. They migrated here from Haiti, and both parents had a very collectivistic approach. They were coming to the States to be able to bring resources back to their 8 or 9 brothers and sisters back in Haiti. And I think their approach to coming into America was such that it's not about necessarily me, but this idea of having access and opportunity for the rest of us. And that perspective, I think, followed into my value system when I decided to go to college. A lot of what I did was for the parents. Wanted to be a lawyer, wanted to get into advocacy, because coming from a Haitian background, this idea of success in America is you have 2 options. You're either going to be a doctor or a lawyer. And that to them were signifiers that you had made it, that you were indeed pursuing the American dream. And so I did just that. I also had that value system of being very collectivistic. I'm earning this degree for my parents. I actually went to law school, did not complete it. I absolutely hated it. And the reason being was the confines of the way in which the law was approached. So I naturally tend to think of myself as being an advocate. And I am a strong believer in the power of the voice. My undergraduate degree was in communications, but decided to go the route of earning a law degree for this collectivistic way of saying I'm giving back. So I'm only mentioning that to say when we think about what the American dream is, I think it's it should be very individualistic in nature, but also contributing to the collective as well. I think there's a responsibility to do both. And so with my approach, I had to find out that yes, it's great to have a dream in terms of being totally fulfilled that's guided by people you love. But it's not until you're in the trenches and having those experiences that you begin to say, or even question, is this really the dream? And what would that dream look like for me as an individual? And I was born in the 80s, went to school in the late 90s. There were a lot of conversations about affirmative action. I would venture to say that I was probably a recipient of affirmative action in terms of getting into the University of Florida, whereby there were 40,000 students back then, and only 5,000 of those students were African American or people of color. And it wasn't until that experience that, being in a space that people don't necessarily look like me, the thoughts of intimidation, the behaviors of intimidation in undergrad, I think that really settled into my thoughts regarding belonging and identity in terms of the American dream. So for me, when I think of what the American dream should really represent, is access and voice, and this idea of belonging. So even though you may have access to a space, do you feel as though you fit in? And that kind of I think that experience from undergrad led into my studies for my dissertation, is how do faculty create spaces for students who are coming in of different backgrounds to feel as though their voices matter, even though you're teaching a subject matter that might be related to reading or writing and rhetoric, which says that you must deliver in this way and you must share in this way. Well, what about their cultural, what they bring in culturally? Are we paying attention to that and giving voice to that? And when I think of the American dream, I think of, yes, there is success, but that success is often predicated on being very in tune with what's real for you and having the ability to pursue that openly, regardless of race and regardless of ethnicity, that I can pursue whatever those things might be on a level that is satisfying to me. And I'm hoping for the next generation that the same will be said, that when I ask my students, what does success look like? I don't want their response to be, this size house, a picket fence, this many kids, and this, the ideal. I really want it to be grounded in them seeing themselves, having access and a voice, and being able to allow that access to be something that you also provide for others. And I think, Senator Coleman, you were talking about that, paying it forward. Like I said, I think you said pay it forward and backward, but I think that the American dream is just really identifying spaces where you feel as though you belong and you can pursue beyond imagination. So, and that's often a conversation for women, then women of color, and then, and then the ceilings go on and on. But for me, the American dream is access, option, and voice.
Wonderful. Thank you, Diane. I'm going to ask you to go first in the second question. We will, before it goes public, we'll splice in the data, the population data that I showed with you. Demographers are predicting that by 2050, the United States will be majority minority. Okay. What does that mean? I mean, I know what it means statistically, but what does it mean So, Diana, what does it mean for you, for example, as a professor teaching and in your life? What do you think it means? What's all of the rich culture that we know that these ethnic groups are coming with? Many of them, obviously, if the stats and the government stats, so I believe them, 2 million immigrants across the southern border alone last year, without worker permits in many cases, not completely documented asylum seekers, deferred court cases. Diana, what does that mean to you in your life, in your role, and then what do you think it means to the country?
I think the foundation, and this is my perspective most certainly, the foundation of America has been built on this idea of immigration, this idea of people coming here for opportunity. You can call it equal opportunity, equity, and the like. And so there are going to be differences, and it's not just racial, and culture goes beyond ethnicity. So I'm thankful that we're having the conversation about I suppose it would be ethnic diversity that's taking place. But I think that the deeper conversation that I want to have and that I'm having with my students is how grounded are we in the values, beliefs, and attitudes that we say we have as Americans, and how is that permeating when we do have an influx of people coming from other spaces? There has to be something about our value system in America that is not just in verbiage or conversation, but also in action. So historically, where we have said, welcome, there have always been differences in how certain groups are treated based sometimes on race, based sometimes on culture. And until we really begin to have those conversations on really standing grounded in what we say our value system is, we'll continue to see more of those divisions perpetuated in the media and thereby become something that is real that may not necessarily be something that I'm experiencing when I think of diversity in my backyard. And so I think it's a great thing for us to have conversations about diversity, but in a way that is more inclusive as opposed to divisive in terms of highlighting those differences. I think there needs to be a discussion on how we can come together in terms of our similarities. Because I think the more you highlight the differences, the more friction, dissension. And so for me, diversity is an excellent space, but if we're not having conversations to build a mutual understanding, it can be very scary. It can be very, it's just in terms of maybe you are from a rural area in Georgia or wherever it is, and you've really never had experience or exposure to diverse groups. And so I'm of the mindset, if you haven't had a space for it, naturally you might recoil. I mean, you might shut down to this idea of coming together. So there's a level of empathy I think we need to be able to extend. That's one of the core learning outcomes for my students when we talk about diversity, and not just in the sense of I am proud of who I am, but collectively, how do we build an identity that says that we're all very proud of who we are as a people. And I think that that's necessary for America. It takes a lot of work. There's steps to it, and at least in my field, in terms of communication, but I think it's well worth it, especially with the shift that we're going to see. And if we're not having conversations, there may be reactions to it as opposed to being responsive.
No, thank you, Diana. I mean, one of the, it's interesting when I look back at my own history. I mean, I went to a grade school and a high school that there were no people of color. In middle class, well, first of all, in blue collar, where I grew up, a suburb of Liverpool, then a middle class suburb as my dad moved to selling life insurance and achieving success. But, coming to America, you start to realize the beauty of the country is the diversity and is the mix. in certainly early days, it was overwhelmingly white Europeans, apart from obviously the Native Americans who were here and treated so dreadfully. And obviously, the Africans who mainly were brought in chains as slaves, which is, I always repeat the Martin Luther King phrase for that, which is, slavery is America's horror, and the Negro's burden, as he would speak in his words in the 60s. So, why white people can love Asian food and Mexican food and Middle Eastern food and pizza, and not love the same diversity of the people is an oxymoron to me. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't get it. But I think the real question for you, Senator, is how does it change your job? As I have a sneaking suspicion you won't stay just in the 33rd district forever, and that you have greater ambitions, whether they be Senate or House of Reps in D.C. Given your track record, all the bills you've successfully introduced, just how smart you are and how aggressive you are. What's the difference for you doing your job as a politician, and also speak to it as a pastor going forward in your life?
That's a great question. First of all, Bernie, you named all the foods that I enjoy eating. I'm so hungry. When we get out of here, we're going to go get some food.
It's all right there on the...
We know what the options were. And then really quickly, is it Diane or Diana? I want to get your name right. Diana. Diana, okay. Yeah, because I'm going to put some respect on your name. So what's really important in my position, and I love what you said, Diana, you really talked about practicing what we preach, these values that we say we live by here in America. And there's a principle, and I'll tie it into my job. There's a principle that I believe in. It's an African principle, and it talks about everybody can get 100% of what we want. If 10 people only got 10% each of what they wanted, but they collectively came together and compiled that, it's 100%. And it's not an idea that everybody subscribes to. But for me, I represent in the Senate, 23 or whatnot of a 35-member body that's Democratic, right? And the rest are Republican. And over in the House, you have 65 members in the state legislature here in Colorado. And again, majority controlled Democrat. For me, in my role, I recognize early that we are all actually on the same team. There's a beauty of looking at lived experiences and how that creates and equals diverse perspectives. Because there are things that I thought I knew and I didn't know. And maybe I know from my own community, but I don't know from somebody else's. How can I learn from your perspective if I don't communicate? I'm not open to appreciating other diverse perspectives. So for me in my role, I'm blessed to say that 80% of the bills we pass here in Colorado are actually bipartisan, meaning that not just that a Democrat and Republican voted in support of the bill, but they actually are prime sponsored by one and the other, right? And so we see that we're actually more aligned than not. And then in terms of my faith belief, I appreciate you asking about that. What I do, everything I do is rooted really in that faith. And it's not being judgmental. It's recognizing that I'm not perfect, knowing that I need grace and I need forgiveness. And so I look at myself and I say, how can I be beneficiary of this and not be able to share that same kind of love and grace and compassion? And so I remember where I was on 9/11. I was sitting in a middle school classroom, and they brought a cathode ray tube in, a television in, and it was on a cart, and they showed us, it was an antique, and they showed us what was happening almost in real time. And I remember feeling in that moment, all of us were worried about our well-being, of our families, our loved ones. We weren't divided in that moment. We were more concerned about how everyone was doing. And so in Colorado, whether it's from faith perspective or even in my role in elected office, I look at things from the lens of everybody just wants a place where they can work. Everybody wants a place where their kids can go to school. Everybody wants their families to be safe. Everybody would love to be able to go to the doctor if they need help when it comes to healthcare. Everybody just wants a place where they belong. Yeah. That's America. Mm-hmm. We're a place where people can come here and create opportunity and they feel like they belong. And that's one of the things that I agree with you, Diana. We have to do a better job of practicing those principles that we talk so much about.
Yeah. No, thank you both on that. Just to add on a little bit about my own personal experience, I was here in Colorado when we had Columbine. We were living in Kencal Valley. Our kids went to Chatfield High School, the rival high school from Columbine. The Columbine kids finished the semester at Chatfield late in the day. I was at Vice President Al Gore's rally, and saw all the cars lined up with the flowers of the kids, the seniors that had driven to Columbine that day and, never walked on the earth again. The head of the SWAT, Sergeant Mark Lewis, was my point guy when I was at the Rockies. We always have a person in the intelligence and security community. And so Mark was my point guy for anything we needed, whether it was scalping tickets or potential players with drugs, and he was the first guy lined up, didn't have his SWAT helmet on, but had the SWAT gear on behind the fire truck that went in. Very few people know that those guys wired the whole school to blow the floor between the cafe and the library.
Wow.
At a time when kids were either in the cafe or the library. And that, I'm not saying this book could stop it, but this book is designed to change the attitudes of those kids that we don't have those things. And one of our theories in the book, quickly, is that life needs to be like a stool and that you have 4 legs. So you have 4 elements to your life. The first element is, I'm a Catholic Christian, but I don't want to push that on anybody else. And I want to recognize that another topic is faith, where church attendance and place of worship attendance is going down rapidly in this country. Again, it's not about that. It's recognizing that whatever your value system is, that has to drive you and has to be there even in the toughest times. You don't compromise your values. So in the book, we refer to it as the driving force of the universe. You can't get more politically correct than that. But anyway, whatever people's belief systems are, you got to have them. You got to have values. You got to stick with them. And sports and entertainment, the business that I've made my career in, is not exactly known for its great integrity. Players cheat on the rules all the time and they kind of chuckle about it. Well, no, the rules are the rules. And I'm not a purist. Never met a referee I like, having played. So for authenticity and disclosure, I'm not a huge fan of the refs. But so number 1 is a solid base of values. Number 2 is family. And our approach is F.A.M.I.L.Y. Which we stole from Coach Greg Sciano at Rutgers. Didn't work so well for him at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFL, but he's back at Rutgers. They're one of our clients. And it stands for Forget About Me, I Love You. And you talk about a beautiful message that I recognize that I'm the patriarch of a family of 16, which is my 3 kids by birth and my stepson, and the 6 grandkids we have, and all their spouses and partners. And I am responsible for making sure they live the American dream and they live by the right values. And I'm blessed so far. They're all doing what they love. A doctor, a lawyer, a property manager, a database marketer. And the kids, one of my kids is corporate gifting, a Sugar Wish, my oldest grandson. So they do what they love and they love what they do. So that the third part, career, and finally community. And giving up on trying to save the world, the idea is in your immediate community, what have you done for the community today? So the 4 principles: a higher power, it's not all about you; family, truly loving family; your career, your vocation, your passion, doing what you love what you do, and then giving back to the community. So that's our approach, and certainly the Aspire Difference Foundation, of which Diana is a member of the board, has certainly added to that. What do you think, Diana, for you first on this one, what do you think about the rapid change in America's complexion? And what are the benefits that we are going to get from that? And I'm sure part of it is things you've already said, but what's the major benefit of this country being majority minority, within 30 years?
As you were speaking out the question, perspective is the word that comes to mind for me. An example would be if you have someone who's studied communication and they've done it in the United States, and then we have someone who's coming in, say, from Bolivia, who's studied communications. We may have been exposed to the same theories, but the applicability in terms of culture, how we apply those theories in real life experiences, will be enriched in terms of the conversation and the dialogue. So to recognize that, yes, there may be values or beliefs or ways of being or engaging that we believe to be true and works in America, but when you bring people from diverse backgrounds with the same expertise, then that just creates an additional level in terms of meeting the needs of all people. So perspective is important, not only just for building synergies, but for problem solving as well. And it's not just based on where you're from, but also the ways in which you think about life just in general. I think that if we're going to build synergies, it's okay to recognize that we just have different ways of problem solving or dealing with disagreement. We talk about it all the time in my discipline is there's a particular researcher that says that if you're from a specific background or culture, the way in which you receive and deliver communication will be different. Some of us are more direct. Here in America, our style is a very direct style of communicating. And then you have people from other Asian or African cultures who are a little bit less direct, a little bit more contextualized. And because that's going to happen quite often, we teach our students how to work through that. And it's not necessarily what's being communicated, it's the how, and not necessarily taking offense to that. So I say, if we continue to espouse this idea of being welcoming to diversity, the benefit is being able to listen and utilize those perspectives, recognizing that those disagreements or those opportunities to build synergies or to collaborate are going to continue to come more consistently. And so I think you're going to get into this at some point, Bernie, where you talk about whether or not we've gone away from being a melting pot type of environment or country. And I think it goes along with that is recognizing that there are no two people who will engage in the exact same way, even though we do the exact same work. And when we get into this idea of goal making and achieving goals or working with people who are not like me, creating spaces to say it's okay. And in fact, we're going to highlight that and recognize that it's a natural space. So I think it's unrealistic to think that because we may be in a particular location, that diversity is not going to be present regardless of ethnicity. Diversity is present with personality. It's present just in a myriad of ways when you're dealing with the human experience. So the benefit is to recognize that it's here and it's going to become a major voice, but that voice doesn't necessarily have to create the inverse. So now we don't have to do it in reverse. Now that by the year 2050, the majority will be a certain population. It doesn't mean that we need to flip it in a way that doesn't honor that we are a part of the collective, if that makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense, and thank you. And yeah, the first thing I'm going to quickly interject before I go to the senator is some of the elements in the book that are recognizing this changing complexion of America and trying to give everybody the voice that you talk about. How appropriate that a professor of communications talks about everybody having a voice, right?
Yeah.
And with a voice, the corollary of that is people better listen.
Mm-hmm.
And the really more important part, in my own research work and in management and organizational behavior and psychology, is that people listen to understand. Because so many people are listening these days, I find, just enough, to use your words, to bury you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm sure you find this in the Senate more than anywhere else. So within that context, if we take the top three, according to Pew Research, voter issues, and different groups will have different issues, different parts of the country will have different issues. But number one, the single biggest divisive force, according to the research, is the income gap.
Mhm.
So what is the book saying about the income gap? Number one, guaranteed national minimum wage nationwide. Okay. We have the richest country in the world according to GDP, but we have more poverty, a higher percentage of people living in poverty than any country on the earth. It makes no sense. How do we stop it? Okay. We stop it by increasing the minimum wage. So here in Denver, my older company, the Aspire Group, at the University of Denver, those young men and women have gone from making $27,000 a year to $32,000 a year post-COVID because of what you have done, Senator, and your peer politicians have done in terms of the minimum wage. Okay, a young man does not have to live in a bedroom with someone else. You know, meaning another buddy of theirs. You know, 2, 3, 4 to a flat. They don't have to live with their parents. They can live on their own. Okay, or the person with a family can actually have one job and survive on one job. Not well, but they can survive. They can do a whole roof over their head and food. So behind that, then, removing redlining, getting the banks and mortgage companies to be way more supportive of giving minorities and lower income people opportunities to own their own home. Although that's not the only part of the American dream. And you guys in our previous podcasts have all talked about quality of life and a lot of other things. Then, so the education piece, which is the second one, is free preschool for everybody, which we have in Georgia, you know, with the Hope scholarships from the lottery. Okay. Free preschool. That cost means a single parent mom doesn't have to have a second job. She can be there to feed the kids. She can be there to nurture the kids, or he can be there to feed the kids. So preschool. Secondly, free pre and post in-school care for shift workers and people whose jobs demand that they can't be there during the times that we are regularly saying you drop your kid off or you pick your kid up. That's number two. Number three is before high school, a boot camp, an 8-week boot camp where those kids get paid. And it's a social studies. It's John F. Kennedy. Not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for it. And it teaches them how to eat and how to exercise every day and how to get along. Black, brown, yellow, white, doesn't matter. Rich, poor, doesn't matter. You're all in the camp together. 1,000 kids in a camp. We use the old mothball military camps, then bring them back, or we use some of the summer camps out of their hours, and we have everybody an 8-week sleepaway experience and teach them about what it is to be an American. Now, you know, the Republicans will scream it's going to be too liberal and too woke, and the people on the left are going to scream and you're going to try and program and indoctrinate us. You know, we understand. But somewhere between the two is a really valuable experience, and $5,000 in the kid's pocket. Job experience before your sophomore year, before junior year, before the senior year, one in business, at least one in charity, one in the government, public sector. At the end of that time, I would advocate that we take no deductions. So there's no tax, there is no Social Security, there's no deductions for those kids. That what those kids get is 100%. We invite banks to be the ones that want to participate. They give the kids 7.5% interest, as long as the money stays in there each year. You know, but we teach them how to manage money, and I understand that puts a lot of pressure on the poor families, but we do that. When they are 18 years old, they'll have $25,000 in their pocket. What 18-year-old kid has $25,000? Rich, poor, whatever, right? You can buy your own apartment. Then in college, you know, if you've done that for 4 years, in college you get $15,000 voucher a year for 4 years for professional certification, be a beautician, esthetician, be a plumber, electrician, all the things that we're in desperate need of in this country, or go to college. So that's how we're trying to address the income gap. You know, the lack of obviously being able to pass on generational wealth, which particularly affects, big surprise, poor people. And when you're affecting poor people, you're affecting minorities disproportionately. So that's what's behind it.
Yeah.
And then we'll get back to the melting pot of Mosaic question in a second, Diana.
Yeah.
So same question for you, Senator, if you haven't forgotten it.
So for me, really quickly, before we get back to the question, I think this brother should run for office. So this is a phenomenal
Thank you for
idea.
not having me.
If you don't, I'm just going to take these ideas. We're going to work on it
Well,
together, if that's okay.
I'm going to give you the book. I'm going to give you the manifesto.
All right, I'm ready.
And I'm behind you.
Already.
And I'm gonna hold you, Senator Coleman, to the way you started with how much of the bipartisan legislature.
That's right.
So who's the Republican that is going to champion RAD with you? You know,
Yeah.
I'll work on Mayor Johnson,
Yeah.
whose wife works with my daughter in the DA's
Oh, there you
office.
go. There you
I'll
go.
work on John Higginlooper, Senator John, who I was on the board with the Visitor and Convention Bureau board when I first moved to
There you
Denver
go.
back in the 90s.
Yeah.
I'll work on getting this wonderful coalition behind it,
There we go.
starting with you. So
There we go. I'm ready for it. Well, listen, I'm going to build off of what Diana said, and you used the word perspective, and that was in the beginning of your comment. For me, when I think about perspective, it's how you see something. Now, you're limited in what you can see based off of your surroundings. I'll give an example, and the person that comes to mind in the Senate in the Republican Party is a gentleman named Cleve Simpson. Cleve Simpson and his wife, Kathy, they live in Alamosa, down south, about 3 hours or so, 4 hours away from where we are sitting here right now. He invited my wife, Shayna, and our 2 children, James and Naomi. We have twins. I've never been to the Great Sand Dunes. I'm born and raised here in Colorado. We went down with our family, stayed with them for a week in their home. He has 900 acres, and it sounds great, except for he's got to grow something, or else he's going to be paying a lot in taxes on that land. And so when Senator Cleve Simpson comes to the Capitol, all he ever talks about is water. Water, water, water. And I never understood the power of why that was so important to him until we visited. So again, perspective. I'm seeing, yeah, sure, he has 900 acres, but he's growing alfalfa, he's growing hemp, and if there's a drought, if there's not enough water, he's in trouble, right? And not only is he in trouble, but the agriculture industry is what generates the economy where he is in order to fund education and healthcare and all the other areas that we always talk about. Here in the inner city, I'm seeing we need to focus on businesses, focus on employment, focus on jobs. You know, we need to also focus on education for our kids. We need to focus on criminal justice. I'm seeing that. But when I went out there to go see him, I saw that and I thought that is really powerful for me to get a visual. Then I started thinking, if I went to the grocery store and there was no produce, what would I do? I'd be in big trouble. We got a little garden in the back. That's not gonna feed our family, especially with a growing boy, a growing son. So he eats, and so I have a newfound respect for him because he invited me out. I'll end on this. I ran a bill last year, and it was very controversial. It's the toughest bill I've ever ran. This is my 8th year. This is my 7th year last year when I ran this bill, and it was ultimately saying right now the law says if you're 9 years of age or younger, you cannot be prosecuted for petty offenses like an adult, right? There was a kid who went to school through a dangerous neighborhood, carried a pocket knife. The pocket knife fell out of his pocket at recess. The cops were called on him. He was handcuffed. He was thrown to the back of a cop car, taken to jail, set in jail for about 6 hours. This is almost like the Central Park 5 documentary, the Exonerated 5, When They See Us. And then he finally got, his parents finally came and got him, but he was forever traumatized. Oh. Never, you can't take that experience away from him. And now he identifies with that. I ran this bill to say the law for 9-year-old and younger, that you can't be prosecuted like an adult. Let's do it for 10, 11, and 12-year-olds as well. Because the average bedtime is 7:30. The average book they're reading at that age is Captain Underpants. And we make bad choices or mistakes, and they shouldn't be. The person who ran this bill, there was only one person in the Republican Party in the Senate that supported this bill, and he actually prime sponsored the bill with me. It was Cleve Simpson.
Yeah, because the relationship you'd built with him.
Senator Cleve Simpson. So again, back to Diana's point, perspectives. But I literally drove with my family and stayed a week to see how he was living, built a relationship, and then came back. And because of that, I get a chance to work with him when it comes to water and agriculture policy. And he took a huge risk. Could have jeopardized his political future because he believed in the policy, because he knew he has kids, he has grandkids. He spent time with James Jr. and Naomi. And he said, man, I hope that would never be the case. They should have an alternative to jail where they learn their lesson. So that's what America is to me. That's how we can be better and work collectively together.
Yeah. Well, I got 2 sons, and I never had to have the speech with them that I was part of. My eldest daughter married Douglas, who sadly passed away, the father of my 2 eldest grandkids, African American. So his dad's African American from Dallas. His mother was, interesting enough, Jewish, white Jewish from London, from Golders Green. And Douglas loved football, soccer. So we went to soccer, loved Indian food like I do. So we go to Indian food and we come out, we're pulling off to go to soccer. We get pulled over, funnily enough, by a Latino cop, DPD, right in downtown Denver. And, I learned the lesson of driving while black, and as an old white guy, I stuck my head out the other side of the car and I go, officer, what is the problem here? Get back in the car, sir. Officer, would you please look me in the eye? See, I'm white, and let's de-escalate this crap because he didn't do anything, crazy stuff, and at that time I was dealing with GPD at the highest level for traffic management for the Rockies. So I called the chief. I just want to let you know what happened. This is not right, that kind of stuff. So back to Diana with the question. Everybody refers to America as a melting pot. As a marketer, one of the things we do in marketing is not racial profiling, but it's profiling.
Yeah.
We call it segmenting. Who buys this product, who's interested in this product, and how do we reach them? So I turn around and say, I'm not so sure we're a melting pot. I think we're a mosaic. And by the way, not sure it really matters, but I think it's beautiful. If we embrace that. If you could react to that, Diana, which one you think it is, and really does it matter?
Oh, I think it absolutely matters. I think the melting pot theory came from this idea that if you are coming into America, there is a way that you should speak and look and be and pursue, and not everybody was falling into that standard, which leads us into the conversation about marginalized groups. I don't look the part. I don't speak the language. I perhaps a lot of what was required of a person to truly assimilate, many people couldn't do it even if they tried, just based on their external identifiers. So, for example, of being a big bad American was someone who had blonde hair and blue eyes. Well, I absolutely would not be that. So I think the melting pot, which sort of spoke to assimilation, where you are taking off your cultural influences and completely delving into American culture. Some of us could do it seamlessly, but I've heard the stories of my grandparents, and I have, grandparents who lived here but never spoke the language, and now they're in Canada, and it works better for them in terms of language. But that process of assimilation, or melting away those identities that are not identified with being American, left a lot of people feeling left out. So I can understand, and I welcome, the mosaic, I'll say it in the French way, the mosaic way of looking at where we want to be as Americans. It reminds me of the salad bowl theory, which says that everybody keeps their identity, and we just really want to be able to create a good salad. And so in essence, that sounds good, but what if you decide that there are certain elements of the salad that we don't want to have and it's still good? Then there's still a marginalized group. Like, so everybody's keeping their identity, coming together for something good, but then you can easily decide, I'm just going to separate in terms of what I want the salad to look like. And so that's also not giving us a community that really values diversity and perspective. So the mosaic would work well if we're talking about a still image, and each of those pieces are coming together to create some image of some sort. I think the clarity would need to be behind what is the image supposed to represent. So when I think of a mosaic, what is the ultimate end result with all of these pieces coming together? Because likewise, if you take out a piece, it's missing, but we still haven't gotten to the understanding of the why behind. The why behind you are that important to the larger tapestry of the work that we do. So with all of these, I think it's important for us. I think what each theory is trying to do is say, hey, we value you in terms of what you bring. We're saying that. But I think that level of understanding and how we do that, we haven't really discussed it just yet. And maybe the melting pot would work if those identifiers weren't necessarily racially decided upon, or if they weren't necessarily prioritizing a particular religion over another. Maybe it could work if that assimilation was something that was more inclusive. So I think that the work to be done is to go a little bit deeper than the identifiers, those stratifications that we have. They exist and they become very real, even though we know that race, and this is just me in terms of my study, it isn't something that we can scientifically prove just yet, but it's a very real thing in America. And I think Senator Cole made a good point of saying that relationship really going beyond the identifiers of, who this, what this person represents and what they do and what they're truly passionate about, into building relationship, then that's the great unifier. I think that would work better in terms of trying to come up with a theory that doesn't speak to those nuances that exist, even though we may have identifiers externally.
No, great points. And the old Native American Indian expression of walk a mile in the other person's moccasins. You walked a mile in Cleve's moccasins by going down to Alamosa.
Literally.
Probably walked a lot more than a mile on that farm. And look what it benefited.
That's right.
Yeah. Same question. Does it melting pot, mosaic, one or the other? Does it really matter?
Yeah, I would agree with Dan. I think it's a little bit of both, but if I had to pick one, I would say mosaic. I had a conversation with a member of my team, Brittany, and we were talking about this phrase, and the phrase is, I don't see color. It's a comment that's been made by different individuals. And for me, I'm like, what's interesting about that is I do see it, but based on what I see, I don't treat you any worse or think that you're inferior or I'm better than you because of your uniqueness, right? And so I think what it is for us is it's identifying that we are all the same, but we are also unique in our own ways. And so for me, that's what I think we love about America. You talked about it earlier. There's so many different types of food and culture that make America what it is. Listen, I'm from Denver. And when black folk come to Colorado, first thing they say is, I didn't even know there was black folk here. Okay? That's number one. Okay, but number two,
and there wasn't when I first.
It wasn't when you first came.
Some web is, really helped us diversify.
That's right, and so in that, people also say, what makes you unique? And I think again, I believe Colorado is in its truest form, in my personal opinion, what America is, what it represents. That we may not have like Southern food type of, this came from here or this came from there. When you come to Colorado, you get a little bit of everything, right? We're not discriminatory. We have it wherever you're looking for. And then in addition to that, we recognize and appreciate that uniqueness. Now, I might be biased, born and raised here in Denver, but I feel as if that is something that we want to see more of, not just in Colorado, but across the country, where we get a chance to try new things we never would have. You would have literally had to get on an airplane and fly somewhere or get on a boat and go somewhere to experience something that you now get to experience right up the street.
You can get chicken and waffles.
You can get chicken and waffles at Post. I went there with Brittany because they have gluten-free chicken. But yeah, you can go and get that. You can get shrimp and grits, whatever you want. But I think that food analogy was very wise, Bernie. It was very wise because you're right. When you use that analogy.
Yeah, we celebrate all the differences of food, but yet people have bugs about particular groups. And one of the most impressive things, when we lived in New York, when I was at the NBA, was people would come and visit us. We'd have more visitors when we were in New York than anywhere else. And I've lived in Kansas, Massachusetts, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Denver, Colorado, twice, obviously, New York City and Atlanta, Georgia. So every time, 3 of the 4 time zones. And then I did the work. One of our first clients was the LA Dodgers. And I spent 2 weeks every month for 18 months working with the LA Dodgers. So I've lived in every time zone, every culture. And I just find it intriguing that people have that bugaboo. I just think they're very silly and they're missing out on so much. So we'd be remiss if we didn't at least address a question of immigration. And this is not necessarily to talk about immigration law, but immigration law certainly says impacting it. When you look at the statistics, the population of the United States when I first got here was less than 200 million. It has grown, 170% in the 50 years that I have lived here. So it's a very different country in terms of size of population. And obviously we've talked about the ethnic mix. We've talked about the decline in religious participation. It's a very different country in so many areas. The major force has not been birth rate, although obviously some ethnic groups are having children more than others. White not being one of them, black not being one of them, some Asians, but certainly some of the Middle Eastern, etc. So immigration has been the single biggest cause of that growth. We're not the Statue of Liberty, give me your tired, give me your poor, or are we? And should we be? What should our stance be on immigration? Without, understanding you have a party behind you, Senator. But James, what do you think it should be?
Bernie, I believe that we should provide asylum, just like we do here in Denver, a safe city for folks who want to come. I also believe they're coming because they're seeking refuge, which is why we call folks refugees.
Yeah.
So they're leaving something that they feel is worse off than where they're coming to. And they want to create an opportunity. Right now, we have a lot of folks in the migrant community here in Denver than we have in the past. And the beautiful thing about when I see someone from the migrant community, they're not asking for a handout.
No, they want to work.
They want to work. They're asking for an opportunity. And so for me, when I see that, I think about that's something that we should support. Here's what I feel like we're not doing a good job of. We're not doing a good job when it comes to workforce. We're not even doing a good job of that for the folks who were unhoused here already in Colorado who may be citizens. And in addition to that, and this is something that, again, I think, you talked about in the book, it's where do we pull resources from? A lot of what you talk about is paying up front versus paying later, investing in our children, making sure they have education, making sure they can get opportunities to work. So in that, what do we do with the folks who have made mistakes? What do we do with the folks who made bad decisions and ended up in the criminal justice system? One of the things that I think we could do a better job of for workforce as well, so whether it's the migrant community, the unhoused, or folks who are coming out of prison, if you got out of prison right now in Colorado, you get $100 and a bus pass. No one can live off of and do anything with that. So what happens to you? You end up unhoused. We're not preparing our workforce even when they're incarcerated, knowing they're getting out, providing opportunities. And you talked about all the opportunities you provided for young people to get paid a livable wage or more than that. Right now, if you come out of prison at the women's facility in my district, which is off of I-70 in Havana, and if you ever come through Denver and from the airport, you drive right by it every single time. We partnered with the Gaylord of the Rockies. There's multiple Gaylords across the country, but this one The general manager is a good friend, Susie Hart. She has jobs for $17 to $25 an hour for individuals who are coming out of prison so they can be housekeepers or work in the kitchen. If you don't get a job like that, if you don't have opportunity like that, whether you're from the migrant community, the unhoused community, or re-entering back into society after having paid your debt, there's a 50% chance you'll go back to prison,
Oh, I'm sure.
right? And it costs us
Recidivism has to be horrible.
50% recidivism rate. It's lessened a little bit. It's gone down a bit, but we charge $50,000 a year for a person to be incarcerated. So I say all that to say, what I love about what you're talking about is creating an opportunity for folks who are coming from other places, for the folks who were here who fell on hard times, but also how do we make sure that we're being fiscally responsible?
Yeah.
So that we can then reinvest dollars back into community that's coming.
Why doesn't that $50,000 stay on for another 6 months or
Right.
whatever to get a head start?
Right.
I mean, my wife was involved with the Children's Village when we were living in New York. Children's Village is the largest residential treatment facility in the country for resident boys. I mean, some of these kids had seen their parents murdered. You know, one child on a PBS special was interviewed by the reporter, and how did your mother discipline me? Oh, she burnt me with an iron. You know, and then they were like, oh, well, should we let that go on air? It's like, hell yeah. People need to understand what they're dealing with. You know, I mean, so when those kids turned 18, they weren't turned out of the Children's Village. There was a program of apartments in Manhattan where the kids were there with mentors until they were 21 to give them a 3-year transition. So we've run a little bit long, but Diana, same question, please.
Sure. I really want to go back to the food being the great unifier. How it is that we can begin to say, I'm open to eating all types of food, but when it comes to other things, not so much. There's some resistance. And I think that has something to do with these mental constructs that are very deeply embedded. And it's not as simple to deconstruct what you've been thought of as your truth or reality or factual than it is to pick up a very basic need of eating. I think it's at the upper levels of who we are as individuals in terms of needs. So yes, we can break bread, but if you're asking me to shift in my political perspective, that's not so easy. Or if you're asking me to have a change of mind in terms of how I think about immigrants in America, not so easy. So what I love about our board, Bernie, I have to say, is that we're providing tangible resources, but we also have, I think, a very compelling component of that mental health piece, as well as the socialization, this idea of being responsible, building identity. Those are elements that we naturally don't go to when we think of being resourceful to an individual. We think of tangible things, a place to live and finances, but there are social constructs that people are coming into this country with that are debilitating for some, not so much for others. And then those of us who are confronted with that, who live here in America, we are also dealing with some very debilitating mental constructs that make it difficult for us to move into this space of conversation, to build in terms of synergies. So when I think of, Senator Coleman, you said this, what are we doing in terms of, there are a lot of opportunities that we don't have with workforce for those that are already here, but even when they get into the workforce, the understanding of the frame of mind, coming from, if you have someone who's migrating and has a family experience that has been lovely, per se, according to whatever standards may be, and then somebody else who's coming in who's had terrible experiences in terms of abuse, handing both individuals the same opportunity in terms of a job or access doesn't necessarily mean success. So I'm really interested in how we are approaching the mental, social elements of immigration, and framing it, making it part of the mosaic that says, I'm coming here, but it's not it's the activity of how you treat me. I think when we think about immigration overall, whether it's illegal or not, there are stigmas associated, and whether we subconsciously digest them and spit them back out when we're dealing with people, it comes out. So I think that there's a lot of that mental space for all Americans to question some of those mental constructs that guide our behavior, because you can give me as many opportunities as you want to. It's the activity of how you treat me, even though these resources are being provided to me. And I think our foundation is attempting to understand beyond and on top of providing resources. So that mental aspect of connecting, I think that that's necessary now and as we go forward in terms of immigration in America.
No, thank you. It's a great note to end on. I'll make a couple of quick points. One is you're looking at an immigrant. When certain politicians, debunk the value of immigrants, it bristles. I've been blessed to be at the C-suite for over 30 years, hire thousands of people, build a company where we've hired over 1,500 people, 100 of whom started at entry level and now managers. When I think back to my green card, alien of distinguished merit and ability application in Massachusetts Department of Labor, which they rejected several times to the point where finally when it got approval, Senator Ted Kennedy, thank God, came in and helped at the request of the president of the University of Massachusetts system to help for me. My ex-wife, who's English, and I went to Boston, went for the immigration and naturalization interview. The gentleman said, thank you, congratulations, pulled out our I-9s and said, oh my God, your I-9 expired. My work visa after finishing my PhD student program had expired before I had applied to the INS. Guess what? You've got 7 days, you're deported.
Wow.
Along with my 3 American children. So you put that in perspective. I am obviously pro-immigration in the right circumstances with the right methodology and, safeguards in place. And the whole mental health point that you brought up, Diana, is just so right on of what does it mean to become an American and understand that. We do touch on immigration in other parts of the book, and we'll share with you at that time. But certainly, Senator Coleman, James, Professor Bianami, Lady Di, thank you so much. I really appreciate your inputs. On this podcast, which was We the People, Melting Pot of Mosaic, focused on the changing complexion in America. Please be noted that you can go to the Aspire Foundation, differencefoundation.org or BernieJMullin.com to buy a copy of the book or to donate. And we assure you that all of that money is going to great causes. And just one quick interest, we found a new level of need, which is grandparents. So there are grandparents groups now who are the primary care deliverer for their kids because of whatever. And one family was supporting here in Colorado. The grandfather's daughter was shot in a drive-by, gang-related, probably gang initiation shooting, and she has 2 young children, both preschoolers, that we're now supporting. It really brings it home. So to all the viewers, thank you for viewing on the podcast, and really appreciate it. Thank you again.